I remember that summer vividly. I was about 15, and my family decided to spend a few weeks camping near the lake. It was the perfect escape from the sweltering heat of the city. We set up our campsite, complete with a cozy tent and a small bonfire pit. Days were filled with swimming, hiking, and enjoying the company of my parents and younger brother. One evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the tranquil waters. The crackling of the campfire filled the air, and we all huddled close, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. My little brother was captivated by the stars that dotted the night sky, and my parents laughed and reminisced about their own childhood camping trips. As the fire dwindled and everyone retreated to their tents, I lay in my sleeping bag, feeling the cool breeze against my skin. I could hear the distant hum of insects and the soft lapping of water against the shore. It was peaceful, serene, until a rustling noise interrupted the quiet. I lay still, my heart quickening as I strained my ears to listen. The rustling grew louder, closer. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that the sound was coming from just outside my tent. It was too rhythmic to be the wind, it sounded deliberate. Fear clenched my chest, and I held my breath, hoping that whatever was out there would just move along. But then, I heard it, a low, guttural growl. My pulse raced, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. I knew I needed to see what was causing the noise, even though every fiber of my being was screaming for me to stay hidden. With shaky hands, I unzipped the tent just enough to peer out. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie shadows that danced on the ground. And there, just a few feet away, I saw it. It was a large, hulking figure, partially obscured by the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as my eyes locked onto it, two glowing orbs that seemed to pierce through the night. The growl grew louder, more menacing, and the figure took a step closer. Fear paralyzed me, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. My instincts told me to stay hidden, to stay quiet, but curiosity and dread pushed me to inch the tent flap open just a bit more. That's when I saw its shape, a massive, shadowy creature with elongated limbs and sharp glistening teeth. Its eyes never left mine as it stood there, almost as if it were studying me, assessing my fear. As the seconds dragged on, I felt a sense of dread. I couldn't tear my gaze away from those eyes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a predator, a force much more powerful than me. My heart pounded in my chest, drowning out the sounds of the night, as I realized that whatever this creature was, it was not something to be trifled with. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and melted into the shadows, disappearing into the night. The woods fell silent. I zipped the tent shut, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. Morning came, and I emerged from my tent, shaken but determined to find some rational explanation for the night's terror. I scoured the area around the campsite, half hoping to find evidence of a prank or a wandering animal, but there was nothing, no signs that the creature had ever been there. I tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to an overactive imagination and the dark of the night playing tricks on my mind. Reluctantly, I shared my experience with my parents over breakfast, expecting them to dismiss it as the product of my teenage imagination. My dad chuckled, attributing the sounds to a nocturnal animal, probably just a bear rummaging around the campsite. Mom nodded in agreement, mentioning that bears were known to roam these parts from time to time. As much as I wanted to accept their explanation, a gnawing feeling remained deep within me. I knew what I'd seen and heard. It was no bear. It was something bigger, something much scarier. Even now, years later, whenever I'm surrounded by the tranquility of the gray outdoors, I can't help but think about that night. I've heard the usual explanations, the logical reasoning, but deep down, I'm certain that what I encountered was something different, something you hear about in urban legends. I always think about going back to that place with some friends and searching for that monster. But that's probably not a good idea, is it? I love to go camping. Been doing it my whole life. Never had a scary experience until this past summer. My boyfriend and I decided to go out to the gorge for some quality time camping. We had always gone with several other people, but this was the first time it was just the two of us. When we got out of the car to prepare our gear for the hike back to the camping spot, two sketchy-looking dudes came out of the trailhead, looked us up and down, and got into their old-school VW camper van. I had a weird feeling but shrugged it off and proceeded back to our camping spot. I had previously camped in the same area a handful of times and knew it pretty well. Once we got back there, I knew of a handful of different camping spots and proceeded to check them all out for the one that would be ideal. I noticed what looked like someone camping further up the hill, so I picked a spot a little further down where we'd be mostly out of sight. Not out of earshot though, as I heard yelling over on the trail. It was starting to get dark by the time we got everything set up, so I figured I'd start looking for firewood. Suddenly this guy appears out of nowhere and asks us if we'd like any help and offered to sell us a bundle of firewood for $10. I laughed because we were in the woods, thus surrounded by wood which I could pick up off the ground, for free. He then said I wouldn't find much wood because they'd already cleared it out over the past few weeks. Few weeks? I asked him how long he'd been camping up there, and he said almost a month. The longest anyone can camp in this area, a national forest, is 2 weeks. I already had the creeps about him, and he claimed he was up there by himself. I asked him why I heard him yelling with someone then, and why he had referred to more people when talking about the wood. He stammered and was like, oh well, yeah, there's some dudes I know camping over there up on the other side of the river. Then he proceeds to tell us that he's been lonely since he arrived. He was from Pennsylvania, took a bus to Lexington, Kentucky, and had been living in the woods back behind where I currently work. I knew exactly where he was talking about because I see homeless, immigrants, and drug addicts coming in and out of those woods every day. So basically he was a homeless man who somehow got a ride out to the gorge and decided he would just live there instead. He had been living on snakes, bugs, and selling firewood for food and beer. But he said we were the first people he'd seen in a few weeks. His stories were all over the place, and I knew he was lying about a lot of what he told us. He wasn't alone even though he claimed to be. He even took us to his camp where there was tons of stuff for several guys, not just one. He said he liked camping up top where he could see everything and everyone. By now it was dark and he helped us get a fire going. I was trying to politely get him on his way back up the hill so I could have a minute to process all of this. When he left, I started whispering to my boyfriend that there was no way in hell I could sleep with that lying sketchy homeless creep right up the hill. We didn't have a gun, knife, or even a dog to protect ourselves if we needed to. I said let's quietly get our shit together and get the hell out of here. Which we did, only we left our new tarps set up, because they would make too much noise and he'd know we were leaving. As soon as I stood up with my pack, ready to get the hell out of Dodge, he yells, "How's it going?" and we proceeded to GTFO as quickly and quietly as possible. In my mind we were either getting robbed, kidnapped, killed, or something else, because he was not alone. His stories didn't add up, and his background of where he came from made me believe he was running from something and was trying to hide by living off the grid. I called the Rangers the next morning and told them about him. Luckily, all he got from us was a set of new tarps. Weeks later, we saw on the news that multiple people had gone missing in the area and that there was a manhunt for the guy who wouldn't leave us alone. I always think about how we really dodged a bullet when I insisted that we left. We found a new camping spot the next year. I was about 11, my sister was 13. We slept in the living room of a little caravan we used to stay in over summer. There wasn't a lot to do, the campsite didn't have any amenities. I'd pass the time playing with my sister, taking walks or playing the Nintendo. This was '98, so Castlevania and Donkey Kong Country weren't nostalgic yet, they were just lame. I couldn't wait to get home and back to the PC so I could get my theme Hospital on. But mostly I'd read. I had a collection of books about ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, and such. I'd pick them up at library sales or in charity shops. My favorites were the unexplained true stories, like the Dover Demon or the Gulf Breeze incident. There was a quarry on the other side of the site. Sometimes at night I'd pretend the two red lights were the eyes of the Mothman who'd swoop down to terrorize my family. What I'm getting at here is I was a kid, and I had an active imagination, but I never believed anything spooky would actually happen to me. If something out of the ordinary happens, it's just your mind playing tricks on you, right? I woke up one morning around 6:20. It was gray outside, the sun had just come up, but fog and cloudy skies ensured it wasn't too bright. I felt uneasy, because I'd usually sleep till 9 at least. It was silent. My sister wasn't even snoring as she normally did. And then I heard it. It sounded like a horse galloping. It was just outside the window. It was unsettling, to say the least. Had a horse escaped from a nearby field? Surely not. I'd never seen any horses around here, and what's more, it didn't sound heavy enough. Whatever it was making circles around the caravan. I'd hear it fade a little as it looped around the other end where my parents slept, and then get louder, almost next to my head. It had the irregular rhythm of a gallop, but I never heard 4 legs. It was almost like a person was skipping very, very quickly, but no person could be heavy enough to make the kind of noise on soft ground. It was fading, off into the distance. Whatever it was seemed to have ran off. I breathed a little easier. What a crazy situation. Maybe I hadn't fully woken up yet and was having a dream hangover. And then it came back. It was getting louder and more insistent. I decided to take my chances. "Rosie? Are you awake?" "Yeah," she said, voice quivering. "You can hear that, right?" "Yeah." "What is it?" "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "I'm afraid to look outside though." "Why?" "I'm afraid it might be the devil." She moaned in fear. There was a thump from the other end of the caravan, like whatever was outside had grazed it. I pulled my blanket tighter around me. After about a minute, it faded again. I told myself if it came back, I'd look outside, and the devil be damned. It didn't come back. My parents woke up around 8, made us breakfast, and the fog cleared. We asked them if they'd heard anything strange earlier. They hadn't. There were no scrapes on the caravan that would suggest something heavy bumping against it. Apart from my sister, there was no evidence that anything had ever happened. Except for one rough footprint outside the front door in the shape of a hoof. To this day, I regret not looking outside to see what it was. But when I wake up in the middle of the night and everything seems so strange, I understand why I didn't.